Back to square one for the Indiana Pacers, who lose another one, this time at the hands of the Orlando Magic on the road. Perhaps one of the worst defensive games the Pacers have played all season. We'll talk about this loss, what went wrong for the Pacers on defense, and the very impressive run TJ McConnell is currently on, all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, diving into a tough loss for the Pacers. I don't even know what to call this game. Awful defensive performance. They had to scrap and claw like hell to be within a possession at times. They never led. Lose to the Magic right after a feel-good, much-needed mental reset win against the Bulls. Pacers give it right back to square one on a losing streak. Talk about the loss. What went wrong? We'll talk about the defense as well, because I think this is up there for the worst defensive games they've had all season. Looking at the quality of opponents they've played and things like that, giving up 126. This Magic team not good. At the end, we'll talk about TJ McConnell, who is thriving, playing very well. The maybe the best Pacer since Tyrese Halliburton's injury, and the stretch that he's been on right now, because he had another fantastic game. Did not miss a shot against the Magic, but lots of other players did, and that, among many things, contributed to this Pacers loss. Final score, 126 to 120. That's the standout number, and the place to start for me, we'll dedicate the whole second segment to this, is that 126 number. The Magic entered the evening 25th in offensive rating. Defense is more so their thing than offense, and the Pacers let them score 46 first quarter points. Pacers really figured it out the rest of the way. They won every other quarter and outscored the Magic by 9 over the remainder of the game. But they started off so poorly and could not defend well enough to get it back, right? Wendell Carter Jr., after the game, the Magic center on the broadcast says, we got whatever we wanted on the offensive end. And that really sums this game up from the Pacers' perspective. They could not stop the Orlando Magic. This isn't like their road trip. They gave up 130 a bunch, and that's really bad. They also did it to Memphis and Milwaukee and Denver and almost to OKC. At least those teams have, MVP candidates on their team, or are really high quality offensive teams. In the case of OKC and Shea's top 10 MVP candidate. I mean, those teams, you'd like to see better if every game from the Pacers, of course, but you at least understand, okay, that team is good enough to do that to you. The Magic are not. The Magic have not scored that much this year. Again, we'll get to the defense in the second segment, but that is where this game starts and ends for the Pacers, is they couldn't stop them. And the first quarter, this game just got out of hand so fast, and it's something that they've had problems with. But this is a problem that I've talked about a lot, is the runs they keep giving up every game they've had since his Halliburton injury. And recently, or more recently, a lot of the runs are in the first half or first portion of the game. This one was the first quarter, 46 points for Orlando early. They were up 11-0 after about 2 minutes of this game. Rick Carlisle takes a timeout. They have to recalibrate, and the Pacers lose the rest of the quarter by 6, which isn't good, but at least they were fighting and scrapping and kind of in it. And look at that. If you remove that 11-0 run at the beginning of the game, the Pacers win, or they're right there. Whatever you want to cut it down to, they're in the game all of a sudden, right? That's a huge swing that matters so much, and the Pacers couldn't get over that hump, which is a shame, because they did find some stuff that worked as the game progressed. Their second quarter was fantastic, right? They got it down as low as 2 a couple times in that quarter, right? Or 3, maybe one possession games a few times. They never had the ball with a chance to tie, but they did cut it to one possession a few times because a couple guys started to step up, right? Buddy Hield was awesome in the first half of this game. He hit 5 for 5 from deep in the first half of this game. He's really found a groove. I think playing with TJ McConnell has really helped him. He entered halftime with 17 points, and then Benedict Mathurin had 14 points at the half. He got to the free throw line 7 times. Those two were keeping the Pacers in it. So despite a miserable first half, Pacers had 68 points at the break. Like, that is manageably good. That'll win you a lot of games, right? 68 points is going to get you to 126 or 136 if you do it for both halves, and that's really hard to do. The Magic had 73 at the break, and they didn't even sniff 140. But the Pacers did find some stuff that worked as the second half progressed. They got good minutes from Isaiah Jackson when he came in with the second unit. O'Shea Brissett was a huge boost of energy. He was a plus 12 in his minutes in the first half, right? Guys came in here and there and provided a lot of value. TJ McConnell had 9 points and 7 assists in the first half, right? A lot of guys figured it out in the second quarter. And all of a sudden you think, okay, maybe the Pacers can do this, right? Maybe they can fight back, get into this one, and make it a game. And the third quarter kind of put that back away. The Magic in the third quarter shot 62% from deep, 58% from the field, did well in the possession game. Pacers turned it over 6 times. Every time it felt like they had some chances to catch up in the third, they didn't. Myles Turner was their most consistent threat that quarter by a mile. TJ McConnell did pretty well as well, but not enough force from the Pacers, and that's kind of where it got away from them. Any momentum, any chance they had of really putting their stamp on a comeback went away, because in the fourth, they played pretty well. They outscored the Magic in the fourth. They got it down to one possession, but it was already way too late for it to happen, and a lot of it was kind of fool's goldy anyway because of how little time was on the clock, and they were just grasping for straws in this fourth quarter, right? Buddy Hield couldn't get the 3 to go. So Duarte had a nice fourth quarter, and really a quality game for Chris Duarte. And Mathurin had a nice fourth quarter in terms of getting the points up. He had 9 points on 9 shots, but there wasn't any lineups that were meshing when the Pacers needed it. They did finally start to defend well in this fourth quarter, right? They held the Magic to 24 points. They went 7 for 17 from the field in that frame. They only hit 2 threes for the first time. They coughed up 6 turnovers. Pacers only had 1. Like all of a sudden you look at the game and you go, oh, the Pacers have figured this out. The problem is it was the fourth quarter and they had already dug themselves too deep of a hole. So much just went wrong for the Pacers, and the game flow never really let them get back into it. And Rick Carlisle tried a lot of stuff. To his credit, I really liked some of it. I think people get so reactionary to like they lost, it didn't matter, it didn't work. But he tried this like shooting plus speed lineup with no point guard in the game. I'm pretty sure it was Mathurin, Hield, Duarte, Brissett, and Terry Taylor were the 5 guys he had in for a portion of the fourth quarter, and it put a big dent in the lead. It brought them back, and that group has enough rebounding with the athleticism of Taylor and Brissett, enough shooting, obviously, and then you hope you can get enough playmaking with the guards that they have out there to come back, and that worked a little bit, and that's kind of what you have to do against this Orlando team that is just so big. That was a really big problem for the Pacers in this game, is the size of the Magic was tricky, and that's why they had to tinker with some of these lineups. But that size is really what made this game tough for the Pacers, right? They lost the rebounding battle. They absolutely cannot do that if they're going to be winning these games. I've definitely overdone that point, but they need to keep up in the possession battle in this game. They did take 3 more shots, and they took more free throws. They did a pretty good job of that because of the turnovers, but the rebounding was tricky, and the Magic, with their size, just made it hard for the Pacers to ever get comfortable in their spots and things like that. And on the other end, the defensive end, when they're aggressive driving, because the Magic players are so large, it's hard to stay in front of them a lot of the time. So they get good passing. They have more angles to choose from because they're taller. So if they can knock down their shots, the Magic are threatening. And in this game, they did. Gary Harris, 6 of 6 from deep for the Indy native. He was really, really good. 22 points for Harris. And in general, a good shooting game from the Magic. So the size gave the Pacers fits. The rough defense, of course, was impossible to overcome. And while the Pacers did find some solutions too late, they couldn't get it done. They drop another one, 24 and 26 now. 2 games under 500. They've got Milwaukee and Memphis coming up again. And then maybe Tyrese Haliburton will come back. But this was their chance to, be 500. To me, even if they lose the next 2 games they played, had they won today, they were 500. They lose to 2 good teams. Haliburton comes back. You could say, yeah, you know what? We kind of recovered. We know what we can do. Guys have found their groove. Instead, it was a defensive disaster class and not a game the Pacers will want to remember, giving up this many points to the Magic. We'll spend the whole second segment talking about defense, but a quick note, I can't gloss over this at all. This could end up being a very big story depending on where this goes. Less than a minute to go in this game. Myles Turner cuts down the lane and is fouled, I think, by Markelle Fultz is who the foul was on, admittedly. I don't remember, but I have a video in front of me now. Myles Turner sets a screen, rolls down. It is Markelle Fultz, and Fultz falls on Turner's leg. He immediately reaches for his right kind of foot, ankle area, and he is limping. Turner stays in for free throws because he was fouled. He made both. And then he kind of asked out. O'Shea Brissett was at the scorer's table ready to check in, but he made both free throws. The Magic inbound. Then Turner gets a steal, and the Pacers end up taking the game stops, whatever. I think the Pacers scored and cut it to 6 at the time. Brissett comes in. Turner immediately checks out of the game and takes his shoe off. There is no, as of this recording time, update on that status. That is, of course, of the utmost importance from this game. Perhaps the biggest takeaway, depending on what it is. Is it a minor Turner injury? If so, when he comes back matters, but with the trade deadline and the renegotiation and extension deadline in the next 35 days, the length of his absence is supremely important for the Pacers short-term, long-term, every term future, given his importance to, their direction, right? He kind of dictates a lot of what they'd consider doing. We'll see where that ends up going. He played quite a good game, 22 points. Before that happened, it was in the final seconds. Let's talk about the Pacers defense in this game. It was really rough at times. One of the worst defensive performances to me for this team this season. What they do wrong? Can they fix it in future games? Before we do that, though, let me talk to you guys about FanDuel. NFL playoffs are here, and we're really excited about our new sports betting partner for Locked On because they're the number one sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers, join today and get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. Maybe jump in on those for these conference championship games this weekend. Chiefs-Bengals will be so fun. I love watching Patrick Mahomes. And I'll do it all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use with FanDuel. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, Locked On Magic with Philip Rossman-Reich. Hear about their side of this win. Magic, like I said on yesterday's show, have been playing well since December 7th. Top 8 record in the league in that span. They're a better team than their record suggests. Still a team the Pacers can and should have beat, I think. If a lot of things go their way, shooting, luck, better defense go their way, they do win this game, but they didn't. And their defense, to me, is where I would point the finger first. This is where the Pacers let this game get away. And anytime you give up 46 in a quarter, that's going to be the starting point. Is how do you give up that many points in a quarter to Orlando, right? They're not a particularly strong offensive team. If you lose a game to Orlando, to me, it should be because, you had an off shooting night or their size gave you fits, all sorts of stuff. Instead, it was the Magic just kicking the Pacers' butts with 46 points in the first quarter. So let's talk some stats to really put this game into context. The Magic shot 56.1% from the field. They made 15 threes. That is tied for the fourth most threes the Magic have made in a game this season. They do not have particularly good shooters, but they did in this game. I already talked about Gary Harris, mostly because he didn't miss a single one, and he's from Indy. But a lot of other guys, Boncaro hit 2 threes. Jalen Suggs hit 2 threes, right? They were rolling from deep. 15 is not a ton, but it's a lot. And the Pacers also hit 15, but the Magic did it on 7 fewer attempts. That 3-point shooting figure for the Magic, 53.6% from deep. Their third best of the season. Their best of the season. 56.1% from the field is what I was going to say for the Magic. Their third best of the season. So the Pacers allowed them to have their third best accuracy night, their number one best 3-point shooting night, and their fourth highest point total output of the season. That is just never, ever, ever going to work. And the Pacers are not an awesome defensive team, but they should be good enough, especially with kind of their new look group, to slow this unit down more than they did. But they couldn't, right? And everything was kind of snowballing in the worst possible way, right? Blow-bys are the easiest thing to point at when a team defends poorly, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to point at the blow-bys. The Magic did shoot well in this game, but not typically a team you think of that has all these awesome shooters, but the Pacers were not closing out particularly well. And we're not containing their man on the ball particularly well. And everybody knows about this, but just to talk about it again, right? What happens is this happens to the Pacers all the time, more so than a lot of teams in the league. They either close out poorly or defend in isolation poorly. And an opposing player, the Magic player in this game, drives into the lane, and all of a sudden someone on the Pacers has to help. So they rotate in from the weak side or rotate from under the basket. And now their man is open. So then a pass comes. And then what's supposed to happen is someone else rotates and helps to stop that guy. And you keep, you eventually hope that the rotations and the help will slow them down enough that you can reset and get somebody on everybody. But that's, one, hard to do. Help defense is hard. And two, can all be prevented by the first guy doing their job and keeping someone contained. But the thing that makes this so obvious to me that the Pacers have been doing bad at off-ball defense and that general concept of keeping someone in front of them so that someone isn't open all the time is they've been giving up a lot of assists recently, right? The Thunder had their season high in assists. I think it was actually their franchise record. Yeah, that's what it was. 41 against the Pacers last week. Then the Nuggets were in the 30s the very next game. And in this game, the Magic had 34 assists, right? The Magic were just tearing the Pacers up with these passes. 7 assists for Franz Wagner, 8 assists for Markelle Fultz, 5 assists for Cole Anthony, right? These guys would just get into the paint. Pacers would rotate. They would make a pass, and a bucket was there. And so the Pacers just couldn't contain them. And that's where it really all fell apart, and is something that when the Pacers have their worst defensive games, this sort of thing happens. And they've got to be better in that way, or else they can't slow down anybody. Now, the Magic had some other stuff in their way. I talked about this in the first segment, but their length makes drives. The Magic have a ton of length. Makes their drives a lot easier, right? Even their guards are big. Fultz is kind of big. Gary Harris is tall. Jalen Suggs is bulky, right? All those guys have the ability to get past you and make a play because of their size, but they also put the ball in the hands of giant players a lot. Franz Wagner is huge, right? 6'9", can really move, can really get into the lane and make a defense bend and break, right? He was a plus 12. I believe that was a game high. That was tied with O'Shea Brissett for a game high. He was excellent. The Pacers had a lot of trouble matching up with the Magic because they would play 3 giant men, and the Pacers play small a lot of the time. They tried some trickier lineups, like I said, but it was hard. It was definitely hard. Paolo Banchero, rookie sensation. By the way, fun subplot, the rookie A versus rookie B for the rookie of the year stuff. Banchero, 23 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. Mathurin, 26 points, 3 rebounds, and 4 assists. So the Magic win, but very close stats for those two guys. But Banchero, a tough matchup for the Pacers at approaching 7 feet. He's like 6'10" and can put the ball on the floor. He also had a very nice game. Wendell Carter can move for his size. Jonathan Isaac's back from injury, did pretty well in his limited minutes, right? They have a ton of guys in this mold, and Bol, of course, the famous one because he's super lengthy and huge, but he had 9 points and 8 assists. Like, they just have a ton of guys like that. And so from a matchup perspective, I understand why that's difficult for the Pacers who play small, right? Nesmith starting at the 4, for example, off the bench. Terry Taylor playing now. He's shorter, even though he can still play with the taller trees like he's done for seasons and seasons. It is a tough matchup for the Pacers to defend this team, but they've got to do better than they did, right? They just have to. And they killed them in this game, right? They couldn't stay in front of these taller guys, and the height really opens up the angles. That's what it is. There's just more options of how to pass, how to dribble, how to create, and the Pacers couldn't shut down all of them, especially when combined with the blow-bys that I already talked about. And, of course, offensive rebounds, 9 of them for the Magic. That will never, ever do it. So a lot of things that went wrong for the Pacers in this game. Their 14 turnovers certainly didn't help. And you can look at a lot of the other stats that kind of fall apart for the Pacers. 56 points in the paint allowed. Again, you don't consider the Magic this potent offensive team, and despite having all these tall dudes, like, none of them are really terrific post players. And they can drive to the basket and score in the paint, but giving up 56 is way too many. In general, Pacers only had 46 themselves, for example, right? That did not help the Pacers at all. They could not protect the rim well enough. A lot of helping having to go on, and they couldn't slow stuff down to the basket. The Magic, despite having fewer offensive rebounds than the Pacers, right? They had 9, the Pacers had 10, had 27 second chance points. Pacers had 14, right? That just won't cut it. And so all these stats that add up to say the Magic had one of their best offensive games of the season, which suggests the Pacers defended poorly, and the Magic did all these little things well that the Pacers couldn't contain and couldn't do against their scheme and relying blow-bys. It all just points to a very poor defensive game for the Pacers. And for my money, you look at the teams that have scored a 126 plus against the Pacers this year, right? A lot of them were last week. Like I said, OKC, Denver, Milwaukee, Memphis, they've done it. Okay, that's acceptable. Those teams score a lot of points against everybody. And a lot of the teams that have scored a lot against the Pacers this year, Brooklyn, I can't even remember all of them, but are good offensive teams. There are 2 games that stand out for the Pacers as bad defensive nights. Their second game of the season against the Spurs, when the Spurs looked awesome. They were really good for their first 10 games. And then this game against the Magic as not defending well against a team that is bad on offense. But the Spurs were good on offense then. I don't think it's that hard to make the argument that this was the worst or one of the worst Pacers defensive performances of the season. They needed to be better. They needed to get some stops, any stops. They needed to force Gary Harris to miss some more threes or contest him a little better. They could have won this game. There were many moments where they were right there. They couldn't get enough stops to get ahead, right? The fact that they controlled the game for the final 3 quarters and showed that they had a winning blueprint just shows how bad their start was and how poor their defense was, that they could never get the lead back. The Magic lead wire to wire. Pacers could have used that one, but they didn't get it. You know who did do well in this game, though? TJ McConnell. He had another great game. He's been having a bunch of these recently since they moved him into the starting five specifically and in general in his last 10 games. I want to talk about his numbers and why I think he's playing so well and what it means for the Pacers, especially with Tyrese Haliburton. Now, to close this out today, you don't want to miss it. Let's do it. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. Go beyond the scoreboard, behind the scenes for the biggest stories in sports from our local experts here at the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, available on all platforms, YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, whatever. Let's talk about TJ McConnell. Sometimes now when I read his name, I once heard James Johnson call him Tim, and I say Tim in my head, which I've never heard anyone call TJ that prior to that moment. TJ McConnell moved into the starting five 3 games ago now. When they played Phoenix on the road, the Pacers were searching for anything, right? A better identity, or at least an identity closer to the one they've had for most of the season. They wanted more defense. Their defense had been struggling, and McConnell plus Nispos plus Nembhard plus Turner is close to the best defensive lineup they can have this season, and they wanted some juice. They were not playing well. They needed anything. They tried a different lineup in Denver. It didn't work. Let's try TJ McConnell in the starting five. Look, they're 1-2 in those games, but given how their losing streak was, the fact that they have a win and were close in the losses is a significant improvement from every game basically since the Atlanta game where they got completely destroyed by their opponent. And I think TJ McConnell starting has been a huge plus for both McConnell and the team. But looking at his numbers specifically, it has just been jarring. And the reason we're talking about him is in this game against Orlando, he was once again very good. Right? TJ McConnell plays 33 minutes, 8 for 8 from the field. Did not miss. Like, it was kind of funny to like joke like, haha, you know, he's 50, 40, 90 after the Bucks game, but now he's made more threes since then. He still hasn't missed a free throw since then. And after this game, he's sniffing like 55, 45, 90 pretty soon. He has been that level of efficient as a player. And this, like I just said, 8 for 8 from the field in this game. 3 rebounds, 8 assists, 17 points in this game. The Pacers need all of that, right? Especially when Andrew Nembhard doesn't play. Like, they have stretches, like I said, where Ben Matherin's their point guard. They had a stretch in the first half of this game and the Bulls game where Trevelin Queen's playing point guard. And not that those guys have done bad. They're doing exactly what's asked of them in the moments that they're out there. They have to be. You can't play TJ McConnell for 48 minutes, but it's really tough, and he has had to step up and do a lot for this team. His move into the starting five coinciding with Andrew Nembhard being sick in Phoenix and then missing the next 2 games with said sickness has been really tough for the Pacers. So either way, McConnell was fantastic in this game, putting the ball in the basket, looking good, and scoring a bunch of points, which is where I want to start. You don't think of TJ McConnell as a scorer, right? Prior to the Knicks game where Haliburton went down with an injury, TJ McConnell had reached double figures in a game 6 times this season, right? 6 times. That's fine, right? 15 against Toronto when they win, 19 his season high against Orlando, couple 10-point games in there, right? But not known as a scorer. Since the Knicks game, that fourth quarter, he was fantastic. He almost helped the Pacers come back and win. The Milwaukee games in that stretch, so many good performances, right? Leading up to this game, in his last 8 games, TJ McConnell was averaging 15.6 points, 8.5 assists per game on 63, 78, 100 splits. Hilarious. Okay, those are all impossible numbers. Well, the second 2 are. I actually think his field goal percentage, given his shot diet, is somewhat reasonable. And after today, that points total is going to go up, and the assist numbers will stay about the same, right? He has been awesome since Haliburton got hurt. And in the 9 games, including the one the injury actually happened, since then, he's been in double-figure scoring in all but one of them, that being the Denver game, where he played less than 20 minutes. In that game, they ran a lot of Andrew Nembhard at the 1 and tried other things. And they, had a lot of garbage time. Had he played a normal minutes load, that's the only game he didn't play 20 minutes since that Knicks game, he might have reached it then. So he's been a scoring machine in double figures more in the last 2 weeks than the entire season prior to that stretch. His offensive output right now is quite frankly just ridiculous. He's been so good at so many things, and the scoring number obviously pops, right? When he's making shots, he looks way better. He's getting in the lane. He's doing stuff that no one else in the Pacers can do right now, right? He can drive all the way to the rim and then be a threat to pass and score. Mathurin is doing fantastic for the Pacers right now because he's getting all the way to the rim on his drives and scoring really well. 26 again in this game for Mathurin. Depending on the severity of Turner's injury, if we even find out tomorrow, Mathurin could be the lead segment before our Bucks discussion. Either way, McConnell is a threat to do both things, and he can get all the way to the rim. That's been humongous for this team. That's been a big part of his success. But the assist number equally needed, right? For a Pacers team that is losing Tyrese Haliburton, who represents like basically 40% of their assists every game. They had to make up for that somehow, and McConnell's done a really good job of getting other guys involved. 6 or more assists in every single game since that Knicks game, including the 8 he had in that Knicks game. And he's just been tearing defenses up. Obviously, the triple-double stands out when he grabbed 10 rebounds in Phoenix, but some other significant nights in there as well. The 29-pointer against Milwaukee where he literally couldn't miss. I mean, that was ridiculous. 25 points in one half, 20 against Chicago, and a good again today. And the reason this all matters, beyond just like having a good player, right? I said this earlier this show, but compared to expectations, he has certainly been the best player since Haliburton's injury. From a raw production standpoint, I think Turner and Mathurin have probably been the best two players. Hield's had some good games recently, but compared to expectations, it's hard to argue anyone has exceeded them by more than McConnell, although Mathurin's recent stretch is giving him a run for his money. The reason I think it's important, though, that McConnell's been doing this, again, beyond just the numbers and, him himself putting the ball in the basket, is this is the closest they've been to their identity, I think, or their style of play. I don't know what the perfect, correct term to describe this is, but, this was the part of their early life without Haliburton, Hawks, Bucks, their Grizzlies' first couple games they played. That surprised me is when you'd ask guys on the team or Rick Carlisle actually said they'd have to tweak their style a little bit. But guys on the team were like, no, we don't need to change our identity. We can kind of play the same way. We think we can do it. We can do all these things. And I was like, I mean, they know better than me. Obviously, they're on the team. But I thought they'd have to change things a little bit, play a little slower, more methodical, try to limit, errors and, increase your margin of error as much as possible. But they all have maintained, no, we can still play fast and play Pacers basketball and do what we do. We'll just all have to be better and step up into new roles, next man up, all the, the typical things that players say and think when injuries happen, because they've all dealt with this kind of stuff before. But either way, when Haliburton is so much of this team's identity, I thought, I don't know if they can do that. With McConnell starting, they can. Right, he is the one who's able to get them into their early offense and push in transition when he gets the ball or when he grabs a rebound and make things go fast. And the early offense is a big part where everybody's moving and ready for the ball and being effective and a threat from everywhere. It's like they weren't like guys off the ball weren't as much of a threat until he started to up the tempo in these recent games. And so he's done a really good job. And I think why he will keep this starting job until Haliburton returns, keeping this team looking like the Pacers of old. So even though they've lost 2 of these games, they've looked better, I think, in part because they've kind of reestablished their identity. And you're seeing that with everybody else. Turner having good games, multiple. Buddy Hield looking more like himself. Mathurin settled into his role better again. Nesmith actually has been doing some okay stuff. He was injured before this game and was not good. But especially on the defensive end, like they've reestablished who they are as a team, as a rotation, as a unit, because he's able to establish that identity with the starting 5. And I think the fact that he's able to maintain the pace and the speed and the zippiness of this young Pacers team has been the crux of that. And of course, that's huge for the team. Everybody's playing better, but he himself has been awesome in this stretch statistically. And I think that's a big part of it. So credit to him for helping the Pacers stabilize and stay on track, even though they are still 24-26 and have lost now 8 of their last 9 games. They need some help. They need some wins. Maybe they'll get it tomorrow against the Bucks. Tomorrow's show depends on the news of the day. I just wrote a story about it if you want to read it. But if the Myles Turner news does come out and it is positive or not noteworthy, we will talk about Benedict Mathurin tomorrow on his really good recent stretch of play. In the first segment, I talked to some guys about him, especially after his fourth quarter against the Bulls. If Myles Turner's injury is significant, of course, that will be the lead for tomorrow's show before the Bucks game. And then Ty Windish from the Eurostep will join us to talk Pacers, Bucks, team building, all the good stuff. When the Pacers have an opponent, we haven't talked to someone who covers them yet this season. So that'll be fun. You won't want to miss that coming tomorrow. Thank you guys a ton for listening today. You can follow me on Twitter at TEastNBA and the show at Locked On Pacers. Hope everybody had a fantastic day. We will see you tomorrow.